Hello, my friend. Tonight, our quiet journey through history takes us somewhere very different. We've already walked through peaceful farms and stood beside warm village bakeries, but now we're following a different sound, a deep, steady rhythm, the unmistakable ringing of hammer against iron. Clang, clang, clang. The sound echoes gently through the narrow streets of a medieval village long before the market opens, before farmers guide their oxen into the fields, before children wake beneath heavy wool blankets. Someone has already begun working. The village blacksmith. Imagine that it is the year. The sky is still dark. Only a few stars remain above the rooftops. A cool mist settles over the village. The streets are quiet. Most windows remain dark. Only one building glows with a warm orange light. The forge, even from outside, you can hear the crackling fire. You can smell smoke drifting into the morning air. And if you step a little closer, you begin to feel the warmth reaching through the open doorway. Inside, the blacksmith has already been awake for quite some time. His first task is not making swords, not forging armor, not crafting magnificent weapons for kings. No, his first task is simply waking the fire. Yesterday's ashes are carefully moved aside. A few glowing embers still survive beneath the gray dust. He gently adds dry wood, small branches, then larger pieces. Soon, tiny flames begin to dance once again. The forge slowly comes alive. The fire grows brighter, warmer, stronger. Without this fire, nothing else can happen today. Unlike modern workshops, there are no electric machines, no power tools, no bright overhead lights, only fire, muscle, iron, and patience. As the flames grow hotter, the blacksmith prepares his tools. Heavy hammers rest upon a thick wooden workbench. Iron tongs hang neatly from the wall. Chisels, punches, files, and hardy tools, each one handmade. Many of these tools were crafted by blacksmiths long before him. Some have served generations of craftsmen. In medieval Europe, a good tool was never thrown away. It was repaired, reshaped, passed from father to son. Every scratch tells a story. Every worn wooden handle remembers thousands of hours of honest work. In the center of the workshop stands the anvil, solid, dark, almost silent. It weighs hundreds of pounds. Day after day, it patiently receives countless powerful blows. Historians often describe the anvil as the heart of the forge. Everything happens here. Every horseshoe, every nail, every knife, every farming tool, every sword, before the first customer even arrives. The blacksmith begins pumping the great leather bellows, back and forth, back and forth. Each slow movement sends fresh air into the burning charcoal. The fire immediately responds. Orange becomes yellow. Yellow becomes almost white. The heat rises dramatically. Soon, the temperature inside the forge becomes almost unbearable. Even outside, the morning remains cool. Inside, it already feels like the middle of summer. Sweat appears across the blacksmith's forehead. The day has barely begun, yet his clothes are already damp. The smell inside the forge is unforgettable. Burning charcoal, hot iron, fresh wood, leather, oil, and smoke. It is not unpleasant, only powerful. It smells like hard work. It smells like creation. It smells like one of the most important professions in medieval Europe. Outside, the village slowly begins waking. A rooster crows somewhere beyond the fields. A dog barks in the distance. Church bells ring softly across the valley. The first farmers begin walking toward their land. Merchants open wooden shutters. Children rub sleep from their eyes. The village is coming to life, and almost everyone will need the blacksmith today. A farmer arrives carrying a broken plow blade. A carpenter needs new nails. A merchant asks for stronger hinges. A horse requires fresh shoes before beginning a long journey. Even the village baker, whose bread feeds the community, depends on iron tools made here. The blacksmith rarely enjoys a quiet day. Work is always waiting. Unlike many craftsmen, His customers come from every corner of society: poor farmers, traveling merchants, hunters, monks, knights, even local nobles. Each person brings a different problem. Each expects a solution, and nearly every solution begins the same way: with fire. As a forge reaches its full heat, the blacksmith selects a plain iron bar. At first, it looks ordinary: cold, gray, heavy, but within a few minutes, everything will change. Using long iron tongs, he carefully places the metal deep inside the hottest part of the fire. Then, he waits. This waiting is surprisingly important. Iron cannot be rushed. Too little heat, and it refuses to bend. Too much, and it becomes weak. Only experience teaches the perfect moment. The blacksmith watches carefully. No clocks, no digital temperature displays, only color: dark red, bright red, orange, yellow. Each shade reveals the metal's condition. His eyes, trained through years of practice, understand what the fire is saying. Finally, he nods quietly. The iron is ready. With steady hands, he lifts the glowing metal from the flames. Tiny sparks drift gently through the air. The workshop suddenly feels brighter, hotter, alive. He places the glowing iron upon the anvil, raises the heavy hammer, and with one smooth movement, the quiet morning ends. Clang. The sound echoes across the village. Again, clang, and again, clang. One hammer, strike after another. The rhythm is steady, almost musical. It becomes the heartbeat of the village itself. For the next 14 hours, this sound will rarely stop. By sunset, the blacksmith's arms will ache, his shoulders will burn, his hands will be covered in soot, his face will glisten with sweat. But the work must continue, because without the blacksmith, the village cannot function. The farmer cannot harvest. The carpenter cannot build. The baker cannot repair his oven. Even the horses cannot travel safely. Perhaps that is what makes this profession so remarkable. The blacksmith does not simply shape iron. He quietly shapes the lives of everyone around him. The sun has only just begun to climb above the rooftops. Outside, even standing several feet away, you can feel the heat radiating from it. The glowing iron is placed upon the anvil. Then, the hammer rises. One powerful strike, then another. The ringing sound echoes across the workshop. Clang, clang, clang. Each blow sends tiny sparks dancing through the air. Some land harmlessly upon the stone floor. Others bounce from the leather apron. A few disappear into the darkness above. To an outsider, the scene looks almost magical. Fire, light, sound, motion, everything working together in perfect rhythm. But for the blacksmith, this is simply another ordinary morning. Hour after hour, the hammer rises and falls. The heavy steel head crashes against glowing iron hundreds of times. Every strike requires strength. Not wild strength, but controlled strength. A careless blow can ruin hours of work. Precision matters just as much as power. By midday, the forge has become even hotter. The stone walls radiate warmth from every direction. Fresh air enters only through the open doorway and small windows. Sometimes, a welcome breeze drifts inside. Other times, the air remains completely still. The workshop feels almost like the inside of an oven. Modern workshops often have electric fans, ventilation systems, and bright lighting. The medieval blacksmith has none of these comforts. Only the fire, only the hammer, only the work. His hands tell the story of many years spent beside the forge. The skin is thick, covered with small scars, tiny burns, calluses formed by endless hours gripping heavy tools. Every mark has been earned. Yet, despite the hardship, the blacksmith rarely complains. This profession is respected throughout the village. People know that without his skill, daily life would quickly become much more difficult. Farmers need strong plows. Carpenters need sharp chisels. Hunters need reliable arrowheads. Even the church depends upon iron nails, door hinges, and candle holders. Almost every object made of metal passes through these hands. As afternoon slowly approaches, the sunlight streaming through the doorway becomes brighter. Outside, children laugh while chasing one another through the village square. A farmer leads his horse towards the stable. Merchants continue their business. Life carries on peacefully. Inside the forge, however, nothing changes. The hammer continues its steady rhythm. The fire continues to roar. The heat remains relentless. The blacksmith wipes sweat from his brow, takes one slow breath, and reaches for another piece of iron. There is still much work to be done, and tomorrow the fire will be waiting once again. The forge has now reached its hottest point. The charcoal glows with an intense orange light. The air shimmers above the fire. Outside, the village continues with its ordinary day. Farmers work quietly in distant fields. Merchants arrange their goods in the marketplace. Children laugh as they chase one another through narrow dirt roads. Inside the forge, however, something remarkable is about to happen. A simple bar of iron will slowly become an object that someone may use every single day. Unlike modern factories, nothing here is made by machines. There are no conveyor belts, no robotic arms, no electric presses. Every single item begins with one pair of hands. The blacksmith reaches toward a stack of raw iron bars resting against a stone wall. Each bar is heavy, cold, and completely ordinary. At first glance, it is difficult to imagine this rough piece of metal becoming anything useful, but the blacksmith sees possibilities where others see only iron. He chooses one carefully, not too thick, not too thin. Experience has taught him exactly which piece will best suit today's work. With steady hands, he places the iron deep inside the glowing charcoal. Then, he waits. This waiting may appear simple, but it is one of the most important parts of the craft. Iron cannot be forced. The fire decides when it is ready. Minute after minute, the metal slowly changes color. Dark gray becomes dull red becomes bright orange. Soon, the iron almost seems alive. The blacksmith watches silently. His eyes never leave the glowing metal. He does not use a thermometer. He has no digital display. Only color, only instinct, only years of experience. Finally, he nods. The iron is ready. With long iron tongs, he lifts it from the fire. Tiny sparks drift gently through the air. The workshop becomes brighter for a brief moment. Then, the glowing metal meets the anvil. Clang. The first hammer strike lands with perfect confidence. The metal begins to flatten. Clang. Another strike. Its shape slowly changes. Again and again. Each movement is deliberate. Nothing is rushed. The blacksmith knows that every unnecessary blow wastes valuable energy. Soon, what was once a plain iron bar begins to resemble a farming hoe. The edge becomes wider. The neck becomes stronger. Small adjustments continue with careful precision. A final inspection. A slight correction. Then, back into the fire. Iron often needs to be heated many times before reaching its final shape. Heat, hammer, heat again, hammer once more. The rhythm never changes. Today's first customer is a farmer. His old hoe has finally worn beyond repair. The wooden handle remains usable, only the iron head needs replacing. The farmer watches quietly while the blacksmith works. Perhaps they exchange a few words about the weather, the coming harvest, or the condition of the village road. Small conversations, shared beside the warmth of the forge. As the new tool cools, another customer arrives. This time, a carpenter. His favorite chisel has become too dull after months of shaping oak beams. The blacksmith smiles politely. Sharpening tools is almost as common as making new ones. Many objects remain in use for years, sometimes decades. Nothing is discarded if it can still be repaired. One freshly heated chisel after another returns to life beneath the blacksmith's careful hands. Soon, a hunter enters the workshop. He carries several bent arrowheads collected after a recent hunt. Iron is expensive. Even damaged pieces deserve another chance. The blacksmith melts reshapes, and sharpens them once again. Nothing goes to waste, not in medieval Europe. The forge remains busy throughout the afternoon. A merchant requires sturdy door hinges for a new shop. A monk requests iron candle holders for the monastery. A fisherman needs stronger hooks. Each request is different. Each object demands its own technique. The blacksmith must remember hundreds of shapes, sizes, and measurements. There are no instruction manuals, no printed diagrams. Every skill lives inside memory. Years of practice guide every movement. Perhaps the most common request of all is for nails. Modern hardware stores contain thousands of identical nails, but during the Middle Ages, every single nail was forged individually. Imagine that for a moment. One nail, made by hand. Now imagine making hundreds in a single week. Each one begins as a small piece of glowing iron. Each one shaped carefully beneath the hammer. Each one cut, pointed, and finished by hand. Entire houses, barns, bridges, and churches depended upon these humble objects. Yet few people ever stopped to admire them. Perhaps that is the quiet beauty of the blacksmith's work. Many of his greatest achievements were almost invisible. A perfectly balanced hammer, a strong horseshoe, a sharp kitchen knife, a reliable plow. People noticed these tools only when they broke. When they worked well, they simply became part of everyday life. As afternoon slowly turns toward evening, the forge remains alive with activity. The fire continues burning. The anvil continues ringing. Smoke rises steadily through the chimney. Outside, the sunlight grows softer. Long shadows stretch across the village square. The first farmers begin returning home. Children gather firewood. The church bell quietly announces the passing of another day. Inside the forge, the blacksmith finishes one final task. A simple iron cooking pot hook. Not beautiful, not expensive, but necessary. He places it carefully upon the workbench beside today's finished tools. Looking around the workshop, it becomes clear just how much one person has created. A repaired axe, fresh nails, sharpened chisels, new horseshoes, arrowheads, kitchen tools, farming equipment. Every item shaped by hand, every item carrying a small part of the blacksmith's skill into someone else's life. Perhaps that is what made this profession so extraordinary. The blacksmith rarely kept his work. Almost everything he created left the workshop to help someone else, and in doing so, he quietly helped build the entire village, one piece of iron at a time. The afternoon sun hangs quietly above the village. Outside the forge, life continues at its familiar pace. Farmers return from the fields. Merchants welcome customers into their small wooden shops. Children chase chickens through the narrow lanes, laughing without a care in the world. Inside the blacksmith's workshop, the sound of hammer striking iron has never truly stopped. One customer leaves, another quietly steps inside. Unlike many craftsmen, the blacksmith rarely works alone for very long. His workshop is more than a place where metal is shaped. It is a meeting place, a place where stories are exchanged, news is shared, and problems are quietly solved. The first visitor this afternoon is an elderly farmer. His boots are covered in dried mud. His hands are rough from decades spent working the land. Resting across his shoulder is a broken plowshare. The iron tip has worn thin after cutting through countless fields. Without it, his ox can no longer prepare the soil. Without repaired equipment, his crops cannot be planted. The blacksmith carefully examines the damaged iron. He nods slowly. There is no need for many words. Both men already understand what must be done. The farmer quietly sits on a wooden bench while the repair begins. As he waits, he watches the familiar rhythm of the forge, the glowing iron, the heavy hammer, the shower of tiny sparks. Perhaps he has watched this same scene hundreds of times throughout his life. Some things in the village rarely change. Soon, another customer arrives. This time, it is the village carpenter. Balanced carefully in his hands are several worn chisels. Months of shaping oak beams have dulled their sharp edges. A blunt chisel makes difficult work even harder. Without sharp tools, building homes, barns, and wagons becomes nearly impossible. The blacksmith smiles warmly. He knows these tools well. He forged them years ago. Now they have returned, not to be replaced, but to be given new life. The glowing forge welcomes them once again. Nearby, a horse waits patiently outside the workshop. Its owner, a traveling merchant, has journeyed many miles over rough roads. One horseshoe has become loose, another has worn dangerously thin. In medieval Europe, horses were among the most valuable possessions a person could own. A healthy horse meant faster travel, safer journeys, better trade. Protecting its hooves was essential. The blacksmith gently lifts one of the horse's front legs. The animal stands surprisingly calmly. This is not the first time. It trusts the familiar hands of the village blacksmith. The old horseshoe is carefully removed. The hoof is cleaned, trimmed, inspected. Then, a newly forged shoe is placed against it. The fit must be perfect, too loose, and it may fall away during travel, too tight, and the horse could become injured. Every small detail matters. With careful precision, the blacksmith secures a shoe using handmade iron nails. Soon, the horse walks comfortably once again. Its owner smiles gratefully. Another journey can continue safely. As the afternoon passes, the visitors never seem to stop. A fisherman arrives carrying bent hooks damaged along the rocky riverbank. A hunter requests several new spearheads before the coming season. The village cooper, who builds wooden barrels, needs stronger iron hoops. Even the baker visits, bringing a damaged oven tool bent by years of intense heat. Each customer brings a different challenge. Each leaves carrying something essential. Perhaps this is why the blacksmith earned such deep respect. His work touched every profession. Without him, the farmer struggled to harvest grain. Without him, the carpenter built fewer homes. Without him, the merchant traveled less safely. Without him, the baker repaired fewer ovens. Even the church depended upon his skills. Large iron hinges held heavy wooden doors. Candlesticks illuminated evening prayers. Bells hung from carefully forged iron fittings high inside church towers. Almost every building in the village contained something shaped by the blacksmith's hands. Yet his greatest creations were rarely celebrated. No grand ceremonies marked the completion of a new plow. No crowds gathered to admire fresh nails. Most people simply expected these things to exist. Perhaps that is the quiet nature of essential work. When everything functions well, few people notice. Only when something breaks does everyone remember the person capable of repairing it. As the day slowly moves toward evening, the pace inside the forge finally begins to slow. The final customers collect their repaired tools. Warm thanks are exchanged. Coins pass quietly across the workbench. Some payments arrive immediately. Others must wait until after the harvest. The blacksmith understands. Life is not always predictable. Trust often matters more than money. In small villages, reputation is everything. A fair craftsman earns loyal customers. An honest worker gains lasting respect. Long after today's tools have worn away, people will still remember the man who forged them. The sunlight outside grows softer. Golden light enters through the workshop doorway. Dust floats gently through the warm air. The fire burns a little lower now. The heavy hammer finally rests upon the anvil. For the first time since dawn, the forge grows almost quiet. The blacksmith looks around his workshop. Empty benches, cooling iron, finished tools waiting to be collected tomorrow. It has been another long day. Another day spent helping nearly everyone in the village. And tomorrow, before the sun rises once again, they will return. Because in medieval Europe, every road, every farm, every home, and every workshop eventually led back to the village blacksmith. The afternoon is slowly coming to an end. Outside, the village begins to quiet. The farmers have returned from their fields. The marketplace grows less crowded. Children chase one another through the dusty streets before their parents call them home for supper. Inside the blacksmith's forge, the work continues. The fire still burns brightly. The anvil still rings beneath each powerful strike. The air remains thick with warmth, smoke, and the faint scent of glowing iron. To someone watching from outside, the forge appears almost magical. Orange flames dance inside the furnace. Tiny sparks drift through the air like glowing stars. The rhythmic sound of hammer against steel fills the workshop with life. It is beautiful, but beneath that beauty hides constant danger. Every single day, the blacksmith works beside temperatures hot enough to soften iron. The glowing metal resting inside the forge reaches well over 1000 degrees Celsius. Even standing nearby, you can feel the heat pressing against your skin. The blacksmith has learned to respect the fire, not fear it. Respect it, because the fire never forgives carelessness. One moment of distraction can leave a permanent scar. Perhaps the greatest danger comes from something surprisingly small: sparks. Each strike of the hammer sends dozens of tiny pieces of glowing metal into the air. Most cool quickly before reaching the ground. Some bounce harmlessly from the stone floor. Others find exposed skin. The blacksmith barely notices many of them anymore. Small burns become part of everyday life. Tiny marks slowly cover his hands, his forearms, and sometimes even his face. Each scar tells a story of another long day beside the forge. The tools themselves carry their own risks. The hammer feels almost like an extension of the blacksmith's arm, yet it is astonishingly heavy. Hour after hour, it rises, falls, rises again, thousands of times each week. The muscles of the shoulders, arms, and back never truly rest. Modern workers may complain after typing on a keyboard all day. The medieval blacksmith ends each evening with arms trembling from exhaustion. His hands ache, his wrists feel stiff, his shoulders burn beneath years of relentless labor. Then there is the smoke. Although charcoal burns cleaner than ordinary wood, it still fills the workshop with fine dust and fumes. The chimney carries much of it away, but not all. Each breath contains tiny particles drifting through the warm air. The blacksmith inhales them every day, for years, sometimes decades. There is no protective mask, no ventilation system, only an open doorway, and hope that the wind blows in the right direction. Summer brings another challenge. The outside air is already hot. Inside the forge, the temperature becomes almost overwhelming. Sweat pours constantly from beneath the heavy leather apron. Clothing becomes damp within the first hour. Water is precious. The blacksmith drinks whenever he can, but dehydration remains a constant companion during the hottest months. Imagine standing beside a blazing fire, lifting heavy hammers for 12 or 14 hours. Day after day, week after week, year after year, it is difficult to imagine. Yet, this was simply normal life. Burns were common. Sometimes a glowing piece of iron slipped unexpectedly from the tongs. Sometimes a spark landed inside a boot. Occasionally, a hot tool was picked up too quickly. There were no warning labels, no insulated gloves. Experience was the greatest protection. Even so, accidents happened. A severe burn could prevent the blacksmith from working for weeks. For a craftsman whose family depended upon daily income, that was a frightening possibility. Heavy iron also presented another danger. Many unfinished pieces weighed several kilograms. Moving them required careful balance. One careless movement could crush a foot, damage an anvil, or ruin hours of careful work. The blacksmith learned to move slowly, deliberately, never wasting unnecessary motion. Interestingly, the forge was not only dangerous for the blacksmith. Visitors also had to remain cautious. Farmers waiting for repairs stood well away from the anvil. Children were warned never to run inside the workshop. Even experienced customers respected the glowing iron. Everyone understood that beauty and danger often lived side by side within the forge. Yet, despite all these risks, the blacksmith returned every morning, not because the work was easy, but because it mattered. The village depended upon him. Every repaired plow helped grow food. Every sharpened knife prepared meals. Every horseshoe carried travelers safely across muddy roads. The dangers became part of the profession, accepted rather than feared. As evening approaches, the blacksmith begins cleaning the workshop. The fire is allowed to settle slightly, ashes are carefully gathered, tools are returned to their familiar places. The hammer hangs once more upon its wooden rack, the tongs rest beside the anvil. Everything has its place. Order is important. Tomorrow, before sunrise, the work will begin again. The fire must be ready. The tools must be waiting, because another long line of villagers will soon arrive with broken equipment, each hoping the blacksmith can solve yet another problem. As the final orange glow of the forge reflects across the stone walls, the workshop grows quieter. Outside, the evening breeze finally feels cool against tired skin. The blacksmith steps into the fading sunlight. His clothes smell of smoke. His hands are blackened with soot. Tiny burns sting gently beneath the dust. His muscles ache with every step. Yet, when he looks back at the workshop, there is also quiet satisfaction. Another day, another village served, another collection of tools ready to help countless families tomorrow. Perhaps that is why blacksmiths accepted such difficult lives. Not because they enjoyed the danger, but because they understood something simple. Without fire, nothing could be forged. Without risk, nothing worthwhile could be created. The sun is beginning its slow journey towards the horizon. Golden light filters softly through the open doorway of the forge. Dust floats lazily in the warm air. The workshop has become quieter now. Most of today's customers have already returned home. The repaired plows have been collected. The horseshoes have been fitted. The farming tools are neatly stacked upon the workbench. At last, the blacksmith can begin one of his most respected tasks, forging a sword. Although blacksmiths spent most of their lives making everyday tools, there were rare occasions when a knight, a nobleman, or even a wealthy merchant commissioned a fine blade. Creating a sword was never ordinary work. It demanded patience, skill, experience, and an extraordinary understanding of iron. The blacksmith walks toward a carefully protected corner of the workshop. Resting against the wall is a bundle of high-quality iron bars. Unlike common farming tools, a sword requires better metal, stronger, more flexible, more reliable. A poor blade could break during battle, and in medieval Europe, a broken sword could mean the difference between life and death. The blacksmith studies each bar carefully, running his calloused fingers across the rough surface. He searches for the best piece, straight, solid, free from obvious flaws. Only then does he make his choice. With a steady movement, he places the iron deep into the glowing heart of the forge. The charcoal crackles softly. Orange flames wrap themselves around the cold metal. Slowly, the iron begins to awaken. Its dull gray surface changes, first to deep crimson, then brilliant orange. The workshop grows brighter with every passing moment. The blacksmith waits patiently. He has learned that metal, like people, cannot be rushed. When the color is exactly right, he grips the glowing bar with heavy iron tongs. Carefully, he lifts it from the fire. Heat radiates through the room. Tiny sparks float upward, disappearing into the dark wooden beams overhead. The glowing iron rests upon the anvil. Then, the familiar rhythm begins. Clang. The first strike stretches the metal. Clang. The second begins shaping its length. Clang. Another careful blow. The blade slowly grows longer, straighter, more elegant. Every strike carries purpose. The hammer is never swung wildly. Each movement is controlled, measured, almost graceful. To someone watching for the first time, it might even resemble a quiet dance between fire, iron and human hands. After several minutes, the blade cools too much to continue. Back into the forge it goes. Again, the fire surrounds it. Again, the metal glows bright orange. Again, the hammer begins its steady song. This process repeats many times. Heat, hammer, shape, return to the fire. No shortcuts exist. The finest swords are born through patience, not speed, as a rough shape finally begins to resemble a real blade. New challenges appear. The edges must remain even. The spine must stay strong. The tip must be perfectly centered. A single mistake could ruin many hours of careful work. The blacksmith pauses often, turning the blade beneath the light, examining every curve, every line, every tiny imperfection. His eyes have become his greatest measuring tool, long before rulers and precision instruments became common. Master craftsmen trusted experience. Years spent beside the forge had trained them well. Once satisfied with the shape, the blacksmith begins refining the surface. Smaller hammers replace larger ones. Gentle taps smooth the metal. Sharp corners disappear. The blade slowly becomes cleaner, more balanced, more beautiful. Now comes one of the most important moments, hardening the steel. The glowing blade is heated one final time, until it shines almost yellow. Without hesitation, the blacksmith lowers it into a barrel of cool water. A loud hiss fills the workshop. Clouds of white steam rise toward the ceiling. For a brief moment, the entire forge disappears behind drifting vapor. Slowly, the steam fades. The blade emerges darker than before, much harder, but also more brittle. The work is not yet finished. To restore strength, the sword must be tempered. Once again, the blade returns to gentle heat, not as hot as before, just enough to relax the metal. This careful balance between hardness and flexibility is what separates a fine sword from an ordinary one. Only experienced blacksmiths understand exactly how much heat is enough. Finally, the blade is ready for sharpening. A large grinding stone turns slowly beneath steady hands. The edge is refined little by little, never hurried, never forced. Each pass makes the blade smoother, sharper, closer to perfection. As evening settles outside, the final task remains, the handle. A sword without a comfortable grip is of little use. Wood is carefully shaped, leather is wrapped tightly around it. A simple iron guard protects the hand. Nothing extravagant, only practical craftsmanship. The finished sword rests quietly upon the workbench. It reflects the warm glow of the forge, strong, balanced, elegant. The blacksmith studies it silently, not with pride, but with quiet satisfaction. He knows that tomorrow, this blade will leave his workshop. Perhaps it will travel across distant kingdoms. Perhaps it will remain close to home. Perhaps it will never be used in battle at all. No one can know. But one thing is certain. Long after today's fire has turned to ash, this sword may continue its journey, carrying with it the skill, the patience, and the quiet craftsmanship of the village blacksmith. The fire has finally begun to settle. The bright orange flames that danced so fiercely throughout the day now burn more gently. The workshop is quieter than before. The steady rhythm of hammer against anvil has faded. Only the occasional crackle of charcoal breaks the evening silence. Outside, the village prepares for another peaceful night. Windows glow with warm candlelight. Families gather around simple wooden tables. The smell of fresh bread and vegetable stew drifts through the narrow streets. But inside the forge, there is still one final story to tell. Not about iron, not about swords, but about the strange beliefs that surrounded the blacksmith himself. To us, a blacksmith is simply a skilled craftsman, someone who understands metal, fire, and hard work. But to many people living during the Middle Ages, the blacksmith seemed almost mysterious. After all, he possessed abilities that few others understood. He could take a cold, lifeless bar of iron place it into a blazing fire, strike it with a hammer, and somehow transform it into something entirely new. To those who had never witnessed the process, it almost appeared magical. Many villagers believed that blacksmiths possessed secret knowledge, not the kind found in books, but knowledge passed quietly from master to apprentice, father to son, generation after generation. These techniques were carefully guarded. A skilled blacksmith rarely revealed every detail of his craft, partly to protect his livelihood, partly because experience could not easily be explained. You simply had to learn one hammer strike at a time. Across Europe, stories began to grow. Some believed that iron itself carried special powers. Unlike wood or stone, iron seemed almost alive. It glowed red inside the fire. It bent beneath the hammer, then cooled into incredible strength. To many medieval people, this transformation felt almost supernatural. Old legends claimed that evil spirits feared iron. Some families placed iron horseshoes above their front doors, not merely as decoration, but as protection. It was believed that the curved iron could keep bad luck away. Some thought it protected homes from wandering spirits. Others believed it brought good fortune to everyone living inside. Even today, many people still hang horseshoes above their doors, a tradition that has survived for centuries. Another curious belief involved fairies. Across parts of medieval Britain and Ireland, people told stories of mysterious beings who lived deep within ancient forests. These fairies were said to dislike cold iron. Parents warned children never to wander too far into the woods after sunset. Carrying a small iron nail or a tiny piece of forged metal was believed to offer protection. Whether anyone truly believed these stories or simply enjoyed telling them is difficult to know, but they became an important part of village life. Blacksmiths themselves sometimes became characters in local legends. Children imagined they could speak to fire, that they understood secrets hidden inside glowing metal. Some even believed blacksmiths could recognize the future, simply by watching sparks rise from the forge. Of course, there is no historical evidence for such remarkable abilities. Yet these stories reveal something fascinating. People often create myths around skills they do not fully understand, and few professions seemed more mysterious than shaping metal with fire. The forge itself contributed to these beliefs. Imagine standing outside on a cold winter evening. The village is dark. The moon hangs quietly above the rooftops. Then, from one building, bright orange light spills into the night. Sparks rise high into the air. The ringing of hammer against iron echoes through the silent streets. Smoke curls toward the stars. It must have looked extraordinary, almost otherworldly. For travelers arriving after sunset, the forge may have seemed like the home of some ancient magic. The forge may have seemed like the home of some ancient magic. Religious beliefs also shaped how blacksmiths were viewed. Many craftsmen began each working day with a simple prayer, asking for safety, steady hands, and protection from accidents. Some workshops displayed small wooden crosses above the doorway. Faith, like fire, was an important part of everyday life. The blacksmith understood that skill alone could not prevent every injury. A moment of carelessness, a falling tool, a burst of unexpected sparks. Any of these could change a life forever. So many sought comfort in prayer before beginning another demanding day. Legends also celebrated famous blacksmiths. Throughout Europe, stories told of master craftsmen capable of creating extraordinary swords, blades so sharp they could slice silk drifting through the air, armor so strong it could withstand impossible blows. Whether these stories were true hardly mattered. They inspired admiration for the craft itself. Reality, of course, was much quieter. Most blacksmiths never forged legendary weapons. Most never served kings. Most spent their lives repairing plows, making nails, shoeing horses, and helping ordinary villagers solve ordinary problems. Perhaps there is something beautiful about that. History often remembers the extraordinary, but civilizations are built by ordinary people, people whose names rarely appear in books. The blacksmith was one of them. His greatest achievements were not famous swords, they were the hundreds of small objects that quietly improved daily life. As the fire burns lower, the workshop grows peaceful once again. The last glowing embers fade beneath a blanket of gray ash. The hammer rests quietly upon the workbench. The anvil, silent at last, waits patiently for tomorrow. Outside, the village sleeps beneath a sky filled with stars. The stories of magical blacksmiths, enchanted iron, and protective horseshoes continue to drift from one generation to the next. Perhaps, like every good story, they survive not because they are true, but because they remind us how extraordinary ordinary people can sometimes appear. Our journey is slowly coming to an end. The forge, which echoed with the sound of hammer against iron since before sunrise, has finally grown quiet. Only a few glowing embers remain. The fire that worked tirelessly throughout the day now rests beneath a blanket of soft gray ash. Outside, night has completely settled over the village. The marketplace stands empty. The church bell has long since rung its final evening prayer. A cool breeze drifts gently through the narrow streets. Most families have already fallen asleep. Only the blacksmith remains awake for a few moments longer. He quietly wipes soot from his hands, returns each hammer, each pair of tongs, and every carefully crafted tool to its proper place. Tomorrow, the fire will burn again, but tonight, there is only silence. As we look back on everything we've experienced, one question quietly remains. Would you truly survive 1 week as a medieval blacksmith? At first, it may not seem impossible. Many people today enjoy making things with their hands, woodworking, gardening, building furniture, repairing old tools. There is something deeply satisfying about creating something useful. The medieval blacksmith surely understood that feeling. Every object leaving his workshop had purpose. Every nail, every horseshoe, every knife, every farming tool, each one would become part of someone else's daily life. But the reality of blacksmithing was far more demanding than most of us imagine. The work began before sunrise and often continued until darkness covered the village. There were no electric lights, only the fading glow of the forge. No machines to lift heavy iron, no hydraulic presses, no power hammers, only human strength. Again, and again, and again, the body carried every burden. The shoulders, the arms, the hands, the back. Every muscle slowly became stronger because it had no other choice. Then there was the heat, not for a few minutes, but for hour after hour, standing beside a roaring furnace through every season. In winter, the warmth might feel welcome, but during summer, the forge became almost unbearable. The blacksmith accepted it quietly, because there was simply no alternative. Accidents were always possible. A single spark, a slipping hammer, a moment of lost concentration. The dangers never disappeared. They simply became familiar companions. Yet, despite these hardships, blacksmiths earned tremendous respect, not because they sought admiration, but because everyone understood their importance. Without blacksmiths, the farmer could not repair his plow. Without blacksmiths, the carpenter had no chisels. Without blacksmiths, the merchant could not keep his wagons moving. Without blacksmiths, horses traveled barefoot across rough roads. Even knights, whose shining armor fills so many history books, depended entirely upon craftsmen working quietly beside village fires. History often celebrates the warriors who carried swords. Far fewer people remember the man who forged them. Perhaps that is one of history's quietest lessons. Behind every famous person, there are countless ordinary people whose work made greatness possible. The blacksmith never expected applause. His reward came in quieter ways. Watching a farmer leave with a repaired plow, seeing a horse walk comfortably once more, knowing a family could repair their home before winter. Simple moments, simple victories, yet they mattered enormously. There is another lesson hidden inside the forge. Patience. Nothing could be hurried. Iron needed time. The fire needed care. A blade requires dozens, sometimes hundreds, of careful hammer strikes. Trying to rush the process often ruined everything. Perhaps modern life has forgotten this lesson. Today, we often expect immediate results, instant answers, instant success. But the blacksmith understood something timeless. The strongest things are built slowly, one careful step at a time, one patient decision after another, one quiet day of honest work. Looking around the workshop one final time, you begin to notice details that seemed ordinary before. The smooth wooden handle of the hammer, worn by decades of careful use. The anvil, its surface marked by countless years of steady blows. The leather bellows, resting peacefully after feeding the fire all day. Even the stone floor, covered with tiny black marks left by generations of glowing sparks. Everything tells a story, not of kings, not of battles, but of ordinary people, doing extraordinary work. Outside, the moon rises above the sleeping village. Its silver light reflects gently across the rooftops. The forge door closes with a quiet creak. Tomorrow, before the first rooster announces the morning, the blacksmith will return. He will light the fire once again, pump the bellows, heat the iron. They belong to ordinary people, whose names have long since disappeared, but whose work still echoes through history. As our journey comes to an end, the forge grows completely silent. Only a faint orange glow remains beneath the ashes. The village sleeps peacefully. The stars shine above the rooftops, just as they did more than 700 years ago. Thank you for joining me on another quiet journey through history. If you enjoyed tonight's story, there are many more waiting to be discovered. The peaceful life of a medieval monk, the hidden world of castle servants, the daily routine of a medieval doctor, the fascinating life of a village miller, and countless other forgotten lives ready to welcome us. But for now, the fire has gone out. The hammer has been laid to rest. The village dreams beneath the quiet night sky. So, close your eyes, take one slow, gentle breath, and allow the echoes of the medieval forge to fade softly into the darkness. Good night, sleep well, and I'll see you on our next journey through history.